I think we got to get started with the big headline of the day and get that out of the way. And I guess to get started, I have a question for both you guys. Have you ever received a parking ticket in your life?
No.
I have.
Wait, hold on. Roy, you've never received a parking ticket?
No.
What about a speeding ticket?
I have, and it was totally bogus. I'll let you know. Driving up the steepest hill in town in an old truck that didn't shift gears right, and they clocked me going 20 miles an hour the speed limit. Outrageous.
Okay, Tanner.
Parking ticket once, speeding ticket more than once, but on the advice of my attorney, I actually do think this is more considered a speeding ticket than a parking ticket. They were going too fast, so they got penalized. But
all right, so let's get into it. Robinhood, this came out after hours. $45 million securities violation fee. The SEC giving a nice little middle finger to them before Gary Gensler resigns. Robinhood has agreed to pay $45 million in combined penalties to settle administrative charges by the SEC that violated more than 10 separate security law provisions related to their brokerage operations. The two Robinhood entities also had a long-standing failure to maintain and preserve electronic communications, which is the reason for why they ended up having to pay this fine. And the fine cites 2020 to 2022 in particular, where these errors were made, and it was for at least 392 million transactions, probably options, equities, crypto, all that stuff. And Robinhood had to pay a fine for that. I've got a lot of thoughts on this, but I guess we'll start with you, Roy. What are your kind of raw thoughts when you saw this headline? The stock really didn't care about this headline. And do you think this is a bear argument for Hood?
Yeah, we should sell it all immediately. And clearly Robinhood is the only one that has done this sort of thing. No other brokerages at all. And it's also not the SEC's fault. Except the opposite. Yeah. I was looking, I was like, man, there was something that happened last year. I couldn't even remember the month. That was just a blip. And I was like, it's not even worth posting or even talking about. But same sort of thing, actually, exactly the same thing. 26 firms were cited. They're settled rather than cited. $350 million for the exact same thing. They settled in August and doesn't get the headlines. The Robinhood one does. I wonder why.
I wonder why. Tanner, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I had comments about this on X saying, you know what, this is Robinhood doing Robinhood things. And like Roy had to show that off. Like it's completely widespread. And it actually, I think those 26 firms, I bet you if you were to look into it, were all dealing with Apex FinTech because they had a big widespread thing where all their clients were hit. SoFi being one of them, with bad record keeping. So this is one of those things, however, that I assume lands on Q1 exclusively. And if crypto volumes, like I'm seeing, is slowing down versus December, I think that this is just another little notch in that Q1 as a comparable versus Q4, where it just makes it that much harder to get that EPS out. And so it does suck. Like this is essentially the same amount of what maybe contra revenue is going to be on. So imagine 2x contra revenue, 90 million of expenses essentially. That is just for Robinhood growing at the speed that they're growing at. Now, people do not need to worry about this happening again, in my opinion. If you look at the dates, this is all between somewhere around November of 2019 to July of 2022. These are all old, but it's just another expense for Q1 as a comparable to the rest. In terms of the greater wealth transfer, this is nothing.
Yeah, I would agree. So to me, I mean, my take on this was actually, Roy, you want to share something real quick?
I was just going to show it's multiple clearinghouses. They actually cited what they investigated. So this is what they mean by entity. They don't mean like Robinhood directly necessarily. That's why it impacted so many. They also noted that separate settlements were done even by like Truist. So very, very, very widespread above and beyond the 26 names. But Ameriprise, Financial Services, Edward Jones, here's Apex Clearing, who investigated it, and just a lot more information too. And they're like, the other thing with this too is they're largely just patting themselves on the back, kind of like, I know it's not a real thing in all jurisdictions, but it has been a real thing, at least in the past, where, police officers are like, hey, we've cited this many tickets. Look how good we are. And it feels a lot like that. A lot of times those that are in authority love to be able to do that, or of course flout their authority. And that was certainly done under the Gary Gensler administration of the SEC. And with this widespread, of an issue, I don't think it's 30 something firms getting lazy or wanting to flout the law or anything like that. Very likely, it was very confusing regulation and direction by the SEC.
Very great.
Which, it's kind of like if you're a kid and your mom says to do all these different chores, and some of them are mutually contradictory.
Yeah.
It's like, well, which do you pick? And you ask, and she doesn't respond and text back, and you ask again, and she doesn't. And you're like, well, I guess I'll just figure it out. She comes home, you get in trouble because you picked the wrong chore, or it was just an impossible situation. That's what this is.
Yep. But that's why big old Gary's getting the kick, because he keeps doing all these gray zone sort of regulations. This is what the whole crypto market is saying. Like, hey, why don't we get clear regulation? We'll try to follow it. This is like, why would Robinhood benefit from limiting their communications with their customers or something like this? It's just probably incorrect formatting for how they kept notes on clients. Like, it's just silly.
Did you guys see the last sentence in that article? Not the SEC one, but the the CNBC one.
No. I was just going to read that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we look forward to working with the SEC under a new administration.
Very funny.
This is their general counsel said that. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think anybody in the industry or space was thrilled with what Gary Gensler did his entire time there. Just stop everything crypto, suits left and right. Like the Wells notice. Do you guys remember that one with
no.
Robin? It's just like, what do you think your job is, man? Like, come on. And they were begging for clear regulation. This isn't just, Robinhood and these other firms saying, hey, we don't want regulation at all. We just want it like the Wild Wild West. They wanted very clear direction, very clear regulation, and the SEC would not give them that. So it was a very frustrating thing. That's one of the reasons why so many had pulled back from crypto, including Robinhood. They were careful to issue new tokens on their platform.
That was Dan Gallagher that had a lot of choice things to say about the SEC, I think, during the investor day.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Look, my take on this is pretty simple. This is the cost of doing business. I mean, you're going to get parking tickets in life or speeding tickets. It's like, it is what it is. And sometimes it's worth just paying it versus arguing against it. Like if you get a speeding ticket for $80, it's going to suck, but are you really going to go to court to dispute it, which you have the right to do, but are you really going to spend the time to do it? So I agree with you guys. The lack of clarity on regulations, obviously this is not a Robinhood thing, because the fact that there's been so much lack of clarity has affected multiple brokers, as Roy mentioned. On top of that, in the Financial Times, they reported today that units of Blackstone and KKR, major financial institutions, also have these same charges held against them today. And their fines were $100 million. So Robinhood got a little bit of a discount from those guys. So from that perspective, you got to pay it, you get it over with, and you move on. I do agree it's going to suck for Q1, and hopefully we can figure out how they can increase revenues enough to be able to deal with that. But this also happened in Q3 of 2023. Robinhood was going to show $15 million of profit. They had a $99 million fee that made them unprofitable. The stock went from $13 to $7. And that is when I began really buying. So, I mean, if this creates a really stupid dip after Q4, and we'll talk about Q4 numbers in a bit, then it's a one-time thing that I think creates a good opportunity.
Do you think there would be that much of a discount, or do you think there's too large of a spotlight on Robinhood for it to crash over such a short period of time? Like going from the hottest quarter to a miss on earnings potentially next quarter? Analysts will be able to price this in. This is not an out of nowhere legal fee, but
yeah, and we'll talk about Q4 in a second. But this is gonna be for Q1. I doubt it would affect Q4, which means
I just mean like coming off of Q4 into Q1. Like you're going to see such an amazing quarter.
Yeah.
Expectations are going to be sky high. Into Q1, do you think that once we see Q1 numbers that the sell-off is going to be that 13 down to 7, or even last quarter was a slight miss because of legal fees?
There is a world where that could happen.